In this episode, we're following the journey of some first home buyers who have conquered that mountain. We're going to hear about the lessons they learnt, whether their assumptions were right or wrong, and the mistakes they made, and those that were avoided, and ultimately how they sealed the deal.
Welcome to Your First Home Buyer Guide, the podcast for first home buyers who want to move it along and become homeowners. But most importantly, it is for you to become an educated home buyer.
I'm Meighan and that was Veronica. We're both buyer's agents and probably old enough to be your mum. But it's a good thing because between us we've got over 45 years experience to share with you and bucket loads of stories about avoidable mistakes. Together we're going to make sure you get unbiased and real information you can rely on. Allow us to guide you on your home buying journey. We want you to become an educated home buyer so that you can stop looking for your first home and actually become a proud homeowner.
We've got loads of great tips for you in this episode, and if you'd like more useful tools, head over to the website homebuyeracademy.com.au, and there you'll get access to our free mini course, How to Price a Property Like a Professional. You will also find the holy grail of home buying education, Your First Home Buyer Guide, the online course for people who want to become educated home buyers. We created this for you to help you get on the right path to home ownership for your first home and beyond.
But before we get into the interesting stuff in this week's episode, we've got the boring bit, the disclaimer. You of course know that nothing in this podcast is to be taken as personal advice. We always recommend getting the advice of an expert in their field who takes the time to understand your personal situation. We've done our very best to ensure that the content is correct at the time of recording. Things change rapidly, so always check with the relevant government authority and your trusted advisors to get the most up-to-date information. Antonia and Rinch are Home Buyer Academy graduates, and we're so excited to be sharing their story today. Thank you both for coming along.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us on.
Actually, you know what I took out of the script, Veronica?
What?
My background. This is a good one.
Oh, so before we get started talking to you and find out all your background and your backstory, Meighan in the video has something behind her. It doesn't look like a house. So what is it?
It's their view.
I know what it is.
It's Antonia Rinch's view out of their new home. Look at that.
Right. So this is in Canberra. Let's just sort of do a bit of a spoiler alert in terms of where you bought. So well done, you guys. That looks beautiful, actually. Yeah, really nice.
Yeah, that's a great outlook. Look, I feel like we know you so well after spending so much time in Campfire and answering questions on the question board. It's been a really intense few months for you, and we feel really privileged that we've been part of your team and part of your journey. We do.
We feel incredibly lucky to have had you guys guiding us along that journey. It would have been a different story without you completely.
Yeah. We came in complete novices. We didn't know anything. And, without the course, without you guys and your support and without Campfire, we'd not have been able to achieve what we've achieved. So it's pretty cool.
I'm so happy. I'm like a proud mom. Well, let's start at the beginning. When did you first decide that you wanted to buy a property?
I would say it started kind of seriously about a year ago, probably talking about it a bit before that, but a year ago was when we purchased the membership with you guys and started doing the course and coming along to Campfire shortly after that. And so that was when we really started learning how to do it and saving aggressively.
Yeah.
Because you were kind of dipping your toe in earlier than that. I did go back on your record and found that you downloaded the free mini course, How to Price a Property, in July 2022.
Oh, okay. So that was a bit early.
Yeah.
We were probably starting to think and talk about it. But I think at that time, still feeling quite overwhelmed, sort of knowing, are we ready? How much more do we need to save? What's the first step in this process? How do we actually go about just doing this?
Well, I can't remember when it was, but when we first started looking, when we first started thinking about it, not looking, but thinking about it, we went out, we tried to get pre-approval. We got the pre-approval, came back, and it was way lower than what we had thought we would service. And so that sort of put us on the back foot. We sort of stopped and sort of, I guess, withdrew from the process for a while. And then we really saved aggressively. We were really fortunate in that we were able to, I would say, almost double our savings in that time. So it was...
Wow. How did you do that? Share some tips with our listeners.
I got a massive job change, which was really helpful. Antonia also has an increased income. We went to the bank of mum and dad, and
that was it. And I think also that was how we increased our income, but how we managed to hang on to that and put it in savings rather than spending it all was we kind of pretended that we didn't have that extra. So every time one of us would get a pay increase, or every time I would, work a few more hours, or Rinch would work a few more hours and get some overtime, we would just put that money in. Neither one of us are very good at kind of micromanaging our finances. So what works well for us is kind of following the barefoot investor method of having buckets and then just not really worrying too much about the minutia of what you're spending your money.
Oh, I love that.
So you put a certain amount into savings, you put a certain amount into, personal accounts, so that you've each got some fun money, and we would put some aside to be able to still go out and have takeaway and stuff every once in a while. But knowing that all the time those savings were just growing, and we kept our big savings account in a separate bank from our day-to-day. So we would have to actually, open it up and look at it on a different banking app. So it kind of just having that barrier so that you don't think, oh, it's so easy to dip into this and just pull it out and tell yourself that lie that you're going to put it back or save later.
Yes.
Yeah. But we just needed that kind of really easy, just not requiring a lot of day-to-day management from us. Just set it up and be done with it.
Yeah.
Such a good tip. Yeah. Just act like it doesn't exist.
And we also, that discretionary spending amount that we worked out really early on, that if we just give ourselves a little bit of pocket money, that you don't have to explain what you're doing with that money or whatever. And, we've stayed married for a lot longer than we might have.
One's a spender and one's a saver usually.
Yeah.
That's okay. So that's really interesting because let me just dig a little here, because it seems like you had some savings, then you've had an expectation of what that might mean you could borrow. You got a rude shock that it wasn't anywhere near that.
Yeah.
Did you then say, we need to ramp up our jobs and we need to get serious about actually going out there and finding ways to earn more money and get better jobs, better paying jobs? Or did that sort of happily coincide? Was it deliberate or just happened to be sort of serendipitous?
It was deliberate, but I would say we were very lucky in that the opportunities were there when we looked for them.
Yeah.
And extraordinarily fortunate in that Rinch's mom was able to help us out, and to have that generosity is just a huge
both mums.
Yeah, both moms.
Yeah.
Just a huge boost that a lot of people wouldn't have access to that. So I think we're really fortunate to have that kind of cash injection, and then to be able to put in all of the effort ourselves on top of that.
Because you've got 2 or 3 kids.
Two.
Yeah. And, our last few interviews with our Homebuyer Academy graduates who bought properties have all been quite young, like Gwenda, for instance. She was saving whilst at university, and, and so you guys aren't in that category, are you? You're on the other end of the scale.
Yeah, it's starting compared to...
are not old enough to be your mum.
No, but it goes to show that you can do this when you're
at all ages
in your career, as opposed to at the starting at all ages. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think that's important because, sorry to cut you off there, Antonia, because, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, well, you know, I've missed the boat, or if I didn't do it by a certain age, I'm not going to do it, or if I haven't done it before I have kids, I'm not going to do it, or whatever. I mean, at a certain point, you know, you say, right, we're going to knuckle down, and you guys said, right, we've got to go and get better jobs, and we're going to knuckle down, and we're going to really discipline ourselves and put systems in place to help ourselves save the money, and obviously with some help from family.
Yeah.
So how long would you say that entire process took? Sort of from even before, like, you know, when you must have been saving to even think that you could go and get a pre-approval in the first place. Were you sort of saving thinking, oh, we're going to buy a home, but you didn't actually have a plan? Or were you saving with a plan that turned out to be sort of not the best plan or not the right plan?
I think we were just saving with not quite the horsepower. Like the amount that we were able to save was being outpaced by the market, especially in 2019 and 2020. Like when the prices, I don't know if everywhere was exactly like Canberra, but the prices almost doubled overnight over that period, over the 2 years.
It was a big growth
settled
market.
a little bit since then, but effectively there was a big jump. And if you look at all the sort of price curves over time, there's a sort of slow, steady increase, and there's huge ramp or a huge bump. And so huge bump in the graph at that time, and that was like right when we sort of said, right, we're going to buy something, and then all of a sudden we weren't quite able to when we first started, and then it looked harder and harder and harder, and so I guess we knuckled down. I would say, like, at the beginning of that period, we were starting to think about it already, but it wasn't until a bit later that we were able to sort of really consider it. And you know, we had a reasonable deposit. Like, I think we would have been paying LMI on most properties that we've been looking at. But, you know, we were able to look at it. It was only after I started my current job in about September of 22. So that, it was only from then that we were really saving that.
Got it. Yeah.
Like
with intent.
We were outpacing the market finally.
Yeah.
So,
Your story is not uncommon, you know, particularly in those periods of rapid growth, and particularly also with interest rates rising and then borrowing capacities falling. So we've had a lot of people that have said to us, you know, that they've really felt that they were going to have to give up. But so I guess you guys just knuckled down, and like you said, you had the capacity and the ability to get better paying jobs. So you decided to start learning how to buy a property once you sort of realised that actually this is a possibility.
Yep.
What was the trigger there?
I think I started listening to your podcasts and kind of binge listened to heaps of them. So just loved your kind of gentle way of talking people through things, but also that you were just no nonsense and just told things straight up and were very clear with people when they were on the wrong path. And I really enjoy learning things. Like I'm a big fan of explicit teaching. That's just, my brain works well that way. So I knew that, okay, yeah, I could keep just listening to the podcasts and kind of picking up bits and pieces, but actually I really want that hand holding. I want to go through that process, you know, step by step, and have that one-on-one guidance as well. So I was pretty sold, you know, after listening to a few podcasts. I knew that I wanted to do the course. And so I think I just sent a podcast to Rinch and said, you know, these guys are great. Let's think about doing the course. And I think we probably didn't jump on straight away. It may have been a few months of listening to podcasts and kind of waiting until the time was right. And we felt like, okay, now we've got enough headspace to actually sit down and properly start going through the steps. So I think we bought the course in December or so of last year.
You did.
Rinch, were you dragged kicking and screaming to this educational process, or were you an enthusiastic participant?
No, enthusiastic, but I have to say, like, Antonia's great at doing those kind of things for us. As you know, she's really good at saying, "Hang on, here's a thing that I don't know anything about, and here's a course that teaches us everything that we need to know step by step along the way, and let's just do that, and then we'll know." I think we were both feeling quite intimidated by the fact that we don't know anything, or we now know now, but we didn't know then anything about the process of buying a property or anything. We just had no previous exposure to it, no close friends that have been through it really, or at least not that shared with us, just had no idea. So
at least you recognise that.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people
that's
think
what she's really good at. She's really good at just sort of going, bang, I know that we have this gap in our knowledge. Here's a way that we can fill it. And she would have been looking for all of the different podcasts and things.
And I was searching specifically for people in Australia, because even though I didn't know anything, I knew enough to understand that the process is different depending on location. So I wanted to make sure that we were learning from people in Australia who could tell us about what the, things that are relevant to us here. So I do remember I did go through a period of feeling kind of like overwhelmed and like, oh, we should know this stuff. What's wrong with us that we don't just intuitively have a grasp on this? And then I kind of gave myself a talking to and was like, well, it's just like anything else. It's like any other process that if you don't know how to do something, you have to learn it. There's nothing wrong with us that we haven't learned it yet, because it just hasn't been, part of our life. Like we didn't save up and buy a house when we were younger. We did other things. We traveled. We, had different things that we were doing with our lives. So regardless of how old you are, the steps are the same. And I think being a little older as first home buyers, what we do bring to that is maybe slightly different priorities. So that made a difference for us. But the steps that we went along were the same, and we just had to learn them because we were doing them for the first time.
It's a bit like changing a car tyre. You don't intuitively know how to change a car tyre. You can look at it and go, well, I know that's got to come off, but I don't know where, the jack is to get the car up, or where the nut loosener, what's that thing called? You don't know these things. There's sort of something and people know how to do it, but you don't know what you don't know. And I think you nailed it there, Antonia, in saying it's not that you aren't educated people. You're educated enough to know that you didn't know and how to source it and find this information out. And that's why, if you're out there in the car and no one's taught you how to change the tyre, then you're stuck on the side of the road waiting for someone else to come and help you and rescue you. And that is a way to do it. But if someone has said, let me teach you how to change a tyre, then knowledge is power, and you have a bit of control over how you get back on the road.
Well, and taking that metaphor a little bit further is like, you don't have to wait for someone to come along, and save you. You can actually, and believing that they know the best way or whatever for you, you can actually make all those decisions yourself and just fix that car, change that tyre when you need it to be changed, rather than waiting out there in the hot sun waiting for someone to come along who's got one of those wheel brace, I think they're called. Came back to me.
It's all right. It's been about 30 years since I've had to change a tyre.
Well, actually, I've got a story on that. I should probably just quickly say, when I learned how to drive, my dad taught me how to learn how to drive a car. And I said to him, right now, I want you to teach me how to change a tyre. And he gets out the wheel brace and he gives it to me. He says, there you go. And I'm not sure if I jacked up the car or not. I don't know what I did. I just remember that I got it on the nut and I decided to try to loosen it and I couldn't budge the thing. And he went, that's why you call the NRMA. Is that shocking? Anyway, I've never changed a tyre. Anyway, that probably doesn't really help our analogy in this particular instance. So tell us about the search process itself, because you guys had an interesting a couple of interesting epiphanies, didn't you? And so we'd love to hear how, well, that sort of, from your, perspective, how did that unfold?
Oh, so many.
God, where did you start?
Along the way.
You started in Canberra. Let's start with that. You started in Canberra.
We did, and then we started looking just outside Canberra. So we were looking in Bungendore, which is a town about half an hour outside of Canberra, because we thought maybe we might find something that is more affordable out there. And so we were kind of exploring the idea of having a longer commute into Canberra, but being able to find, more house. And so we did. We spent a few weekends out there looking around and found some things that we liked. But as we continued along the process, and as we kind of became more familiar with the market and what you could get out there and what you could get here in Canberra, we realized that it wasn't really a good fit for our family at this phase of our life. The kids have a huge, all of their support networks, so their social networks are here. Same with me, like all of my friends are here in Canberra. And even though we do, we do drive a lot to get to different places, the more I thought about it, the more I realized there's quite a big difference between sort of jumping in the car to drive 10 minutes or 15 minutes a couple of times a day to driving half an hour and then getting home and going, oh, I'm really not going to go out again, and I'm not going to drive an extra hour just to go and do something. And so it really started to feel like that decision would be cutting ourselves off from community, which is really important to us. And so we kind of backtracked and started looking more in our local area, like suburbs that we really liked in Canberra.
Because originally, when we first started talking to you in Campfire, I do believe that you weren't wedded to any particular area.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
we may have sent you on a virtual road trip.
Yes,
Yeah,
you were
that's
our
right.
inspiration for that podcast episode.
And I'd forgotten about that, actually, because we did do some research early on, looking at kind of different places in Australia. And I have to tell you, we didn't go that deeply into it, because in the process of doing that, we realized we do not have what it takes to uproot ourselves. We're too tired to move.
But it was a good thing to go through, wasn't it? Because it really reinforced you where you wanted to be.
It did. Oh, and the other thing, it wasn't just that we were lazy and didn't want to move. It was that as I was kind of Googling, good places to live in Australia, like good places to raise a family, guess what kept coming up?
Canberra.
It's in Australia to raise a family, best place with free activities for kids. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, it is a very easy place to live. There's green space. There's, lots of free activities. There's museums. There's galleries. There's, not a lot of nightlife. And I know people like to make fun of Canberra. If you come here from Sydney or Melbourne and you're expecting kind of a bigger urban center, you're not going to get it here. But that's not what we are looking for. We are, at home in bed quite early most nights. So, we're quite
It's a different phase of life.
It is. We're quite happy with the slower pace of life in Canberra. So
I think what's so good about that, though, is that you started off sort of saying, look, we're not wedded here. Because I remember you saying we don't have any family ties here. Our kids are homeschooled, so they're not sort of stuck in a particular school. Yep. The world is our oyster in a way, or Australia's our oyster. And sometimes when you've got too much choice, it's hard to make a decision. In fact, there's actually lots of studies on this that show the more choice you have, the less likely you are to make a decision. So we talked about a framework to help you sort of work through to actually narrow that down. And so it's classic to think that it actually ended up narrowing you exactly where you already were. But what an amazing process to even get you there, so it's
even
so good.
We kept narrowing it down and narrowing it down and narrowing it down. Like once we settled on Canberra, we were looking in the West Belconnen area. And even within that, we started narrowing it down. Or not this one, not this one, not this. So it was kind of, it was an ongoing process that was really important to our decision in the end. So it was good.
I loved that.
Yeah, and because it's always moving forward as well. Like this, the exploration. Some people sort of feel like, oh, that's it's a bit airy-fairy and I just want to get more concrete about it. But it's like finding out what you don't want is just as important as in the whole process of helping you work out exactly what you do want. So we're very excited about that, but also because you did grow up in Canberra, didn't you, Rinch? So you also have preconceptions around certain areas that have,
I do.
what I believe
and we
might have changed.
Nearly bought a place in a suburb that I considered a bit, I wouldn't want to live there. But that place ended up going for way outside of our budget. So maybe I should have wanted to go.
It's not as nice, I think, as the place that we ultimately bought. So it's kind of cool to see that, because it did go at auction, and we decided not to go to the auction for that place. And then it ended up going for more than what we paid for our place. But we're much happier with our place because it's a better fit for us.
Yeah, definitely.
Fantastic. And as a view.
Yes, which is lovely. Now, the type of property that you were looking for, did that change, apart from the view, because you weren't really looking specifically for a view before, but did the house itself, did you find that really what you knew exactly how much space you needed and that was what was fixed?
More or less.
I think we got more confident about what we wanted and what our priorities were. But we knew from the beginning that we didn't want to downsize. We didn't want to move into a smaller place. I think being older first-time buyers gave us that kind of feeling that we didn't actually want to do the stepping stone process if we could avoid it. We didn't want to, move our kids into a smaller place and kind of scrimp and save for even more years to be able to afford the next step up. We wanted to, if possible, get a place that was going to feel like an upgrade on our current rental, and just be big enough and fit our needs for the next few years to come. So whether or not it'll be our forever home, I don't know. It certainly could be. It feels like it's got enough room for us, space for us. It ticks all the boxes currently, and there's also opportunity to add value. So yeah, to answer your question, which now I can't remember what it was.
It's basically the type of property, did it remain sort of stable or static in terms of what you're after?
I think
what is important and what we talk about a lot, yes, there's a process to go through. Like you said earlier, it doesn't matter what stage in life you're at, the actual process of buying is the same. The outcomes are different though. What is right for one buyer is very different to what is right for somebody else in terms of, like you said, your stage of life, you didn't want to do the stepping stone strategy, which when you're younger, you've got more of a runway and you can do that, right? So, and the where to buy process that we take people through, that is really so unique in terms of the outcome and the decisions that individuals make, because it's a framework. It's bringing in what you need and your circumstances in order to then get clarity around what to be looking for. And so it's been a real joy to be part of your journey and watching that unfold, so we're there to help and guide and provide the resources for you, but you guys are the ones making the decision. And it's been really great to watch.
Well, we've loved it. There have been stressful moments along the way, but overall, I would not say that it has been a stressful process. People often talk about how house buying is one of the most stressful things that you can do. And I certainly can see there have been points along the way where we've gone, oh, wow, yeah, this bit's quite stressful. But having your support and being able to come along to Campfire every week, it's just been a good time. It's just been so fun to connect with other people who are going through a similar journey and celebrating with them when they buy a house, and having the benefit of their experience to learn from, as well as your guidance, has just been so valuable. So overall, it's been just a really good time, I'd say.
Yeah.
I love that.
Well, it's no substitute for knowing what you're doing, right? And
knowledge is power.
Yeah, and that takes away the stress, because the stress comes from not knowing, right? From the fear that you don't know or whatever, and that is taken away by just knowing what you're doing. So even as a first home buyer who hasn't done it before, there's obviously still stuff that caught us by surprise along the way, but the amount that we knew sort of covered us even when that happened. So
Even people who've done it once or twice before, they can easily find themselves in situations just like that, but they often don't enter into it thinking that it's going to happen because they think, well, I've done this before. But there's so many different things that can happen. I think that you also went through a few different negotiation processes in the sense that you did go for kissed a few frogs before you got your prince, so to speak. You went to auction. You looked at private treaty offers. There was off-market in there as well. So do you want to sort of take us through some of those or some of the experiences that you had and what happened?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the first one that we was it the first one that the first one that we really looked at was one that McGregor place that we walked in and we really liked it. Had a good vibe. And when we and so we started getting interested, we got the contract and started doing all of that process. When we went back to have a second look at it, I think it was only the second look, it seemed a lot smaller. And then all of a sudden we were sort of unpeeling some of the layers and going, hang on, this just isn't going to work. As much as we liked the place, we ultimately decided that it wouldn't be a good fit for us. So we took that knowledge that we had accumulated, all of the research that we'd done, our due diligence, and we decided not to pursue that one. Then we went on to the first auction one. The first auction one, we priced it much lower than what they had the guide at. But I don't know, maybe it's like 60,000.
We priced it within what they had verbally told us.
Yeah.
But I don't remember if they had a written.
No, yeah, they may not have actually published.
So
I think it was verbal.
They verbally told us a range, and we were willing to offer within that range. So I don't think we were far off in what we were wanting to offer. But it was
because that one passed in, didn't it?
Yeah, when we went to auction, passed into us, like we were the highest bidders, passed into us, and then we offered what we thought was the right amount for us, which was considerably above what it had passed in at. So, but obviously not what they wanted.
The reserve was set very, very high.
The reserve like way high,
ludicrously high. So there was a bit of back and forth with that. A couple of tense days for us. So we sort of left, and then Rinch was just texting back and forth with the agent for the next 48 hours. And we weren't willing or able to go higher than, our final offer. And it's kind of killing me, the curiosity, because I don't know what it actually went for.
Did it sell?
It sell eventually.
And is it online and just hasn't got a price?
It hasn't got a price.
Just ring the agent. Just ring him and ask him. Just ring him.
Ask.
Do it's funny though, because we were with you through that process, because obviously you come into Campfire and you're doing your pricing research, you're looking at where it should sell, what they're quoting, etc. And this is the thing, you said that they were quoting high, and everyone talks about underquoting, and it does happen a lot, right? More often than not, except in Queensland where they can't quote at all. Usually in an auction campaign, the properties are underquoted to varying degrees. Whether it's underquoted, meaning just the very bottom of the range, they put on the agency agreement, which is a reasonable range, or underquoted as in a lot lower than really they expect. But in this particular case, it seems like the vendor always had quite high expectations, and so the agents were quoting higher.
They were quoting within our range. Before the auction, but then we only learned about how high the reserve was set afterwards, and it was much, much higher than what they had verbally communicated to us.
Yeah. But even then, talk a bit. Agents tend to quote less than your price research would show. There's, so it's unusual they'll quote within a reasonable range. It's usually under. So it's just, but all of this stuff is all experience, isn't it? So you find yourself there. You don't end up continuing to negotiate, you continue moving on, and then you found a number of other properties. All of a sudden, there were lots on the market.
There were, yeah. So it was a really good learning experience for us. I'm glad that we got to go through the process of going to auction, just because we'd done so much learning about it. It was really fun to put it into practice. And I'm glad that we got to go through that kind of roller coaster of emotion, because it really showed us that that's part of the process. And we were able to kind of step back and go, okay, let's not get overwhelmed by how up and down this is. Let's just keep coming back to, what we know to be true, which is how much we want to offer, how much we think it's worth, just all of those things that you had talked about.
And when they came to us with that sort of, I guess, tactic of like having the reserve set really high and sort of saying, oh, well, you haven't met the reserve, we were just like, well, that's our offer, because that's what we had decided. Mm-hmm. And we're like, in the end, we are so glad we didn't get it, because they could easily have just, if the vendor had been not chasing that higher number, we would have ended up buying that house that day. And, we were
which
really
you did like.
It
was a genuine option for you.
It was. And it was, I still think it is a very nice house, but just comparing it with what we ended up with, it didn't fit our needs as well in several ways. So it's all worked out really well. And I know that you tend to sort of rationalize after the fact. I think people are happy with what they ended up with, but it does feel that where we ended up ticks more of our boxes.
Something was meant to be there.
Away from us.
Yeah.
I just want to home in, a couple of times we talked about your confidence in the pricing, and it's one of the biggest questions that we get from first home buyers is, how do I work out what to pay? Now, through the process, I know that you built up quite a great feeling of confidence in working out what to pay and how to do your pricing analysis. Talk to us about that journey. Because at the start, it was a bit hard for you to work out, where does it sit? How do I work out what I should offer? And then towards the end, you're almost experts.
Well, I think it's just that familiarity.
Yeah.
Like we looked at a lot of houses. We went through as many as we could that we then watched what they sold for. And this was early on, like really before we were even ready to buy in houses. And that gave us that familiarity with what you get in that price range and what they actually were selling for.
And there's no substitute for actually physically going to see the house and then watching what it sells for.
Yeah.
We did, of course, look at, recent sales online, but I found that we just got a much better sense for it if we had seen it in person as well as looking at the listing on the website. So it was really nice that we were able to look at so many houses and then watch their, the sales and everything.
Yeah.
There's no substitute for getting your feet on the ground and then applying a framework and a methodology that helps you come to an analytical outcome for that particular part of the process.
The other thing that was really helpful with that part of the process is bringing our ideas to you during campfire and showing you what we thought were comparable properties and having you guys go, oh no, that's superior, that's inferior, here's why, and explaining it, because I especially had picked out a few that I would say, oh, these are pretty comparable, and you would really go into the nitty gritty of why they were inferior or superior. So having that kind of explained on a case-by-case basis was so helpful for me. I don't think I was able to really grasp it when it was too abstract, but having you actually look at the pictures and walk me through just gave me that much deeper understanding.
That's so cool about having links. When Meighan and I both started in real estate, the internet was barely used, and we used
there were two portals, and they had a couple of properties on them, and it cost hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars to put a property on there.
But we used to, when I was doing price research as a young agent, it was all API data was just like it looked like DOS. If anyone remembers DOS on computers, like before Windows.
There weren't many pictures, were there? Just a map.
It was just a pure data, list of addresses and prices and dates, and used to print that off and then go for a drive. And there were no floor plans, there were no photos, and it was 3 months old. All of the data was 3 months old. So the ability to these days to be able to just say, look, these are the recent sales, and pop the links in the chat, and we open them up and discuss them in the campfire. It's so cool. It's so great. So tell us you don't have a mortgage yet, but you're going to have one soon. How are you feeling about that?
Love it.
Yeah, like as Antonia mentioned, there have been a few things along the way which were a bit stressful, more than like the baseline, and sorting out the mortgage has been one of those things. Just because we had a little bit of so a few challenges just sort of getting the paperwork and the admin through with the mortgage brokers. So there was a bit of extra back and forth, I think, which I found a bit stressful. And communication is really important in that time. For me, I just like to really know what's going on, and like who's waiting for who to communicate now. And, again, because you're doing it for the first time, you don't know what you don't know. Am I expected to go now to create the bank accounts myself, or does somebody like create them for us, or does, like those kind of questions? I feel like I would have appreciated knowing the answers to those maybe beforehand. But it's been that part of the process has been a little more stressful than other things, but it's still not that bad. I think it'll feel stressful once we start having to pay.
Bit of a surprise every now and then of what you've got to cough up, isn't there, when it comes to mortgages?
All right. Well, hopefully we're into 2024. Hopefully we start to see some interest rates going in the other direction at some point of time. But anyway.
That'd be nice.
That'd be good.
So what advice would you have for someone who is thinking about doing the Your First Home Buyer Guide course?
I'd say just get on to it early. Yes.
It's a no-brainer. Do it straight away, as early as you can.
Straight away, because you might not know what you need to be ready. So just jump on and do it, because you can always do it again, which we found ourselves both going back and listening and watching parts of the course that were relevant to where we were in the journey over and over again. So we kind of did it the whole way through, and then went back and would review whatever step we were initially up to. So,
and it's less than $1,000 at the end of the day when you are buying a house that is nothing, and you will save just in knowing.
Yeah, I can't put obviously a figure on how much we've saved, but it certainly feels like we saved ourselves from overspending, or it's that peace of mind too, because we're very confident in what we offered and how much we've paid and the value that we've gotten. So we're not kind of wondering, did we overpay or gotten something better, or could we have saved money here or there? So it's absolutely worth every penny.
Like just for the release from stress of knowing what we were doing, I would pay that twice over.
All right, so we're only charging value for money. Should be then.
Yeah, that's what we're saying there.
Well, it sounds like the peace of mind, that it gave you. And look, we've been thrilled to be part of your journey, as I mentioned before. We're going to miss you in Campfire, and it's been an honour. And for us, I think I speak for Meighan when I say this, that we never ever forget how much of a privilege it is to help people buy their first home, buy any home for that matter. We're both buyers agents. We're in the business of buying property for people. It's something that we never forget how important it is and how privileged it is to have people trust us. And we really do appreciate that. And we are so thrilled that we've been able to help you. Well, thank you very much. We couldn't have done it without you. We really, really appreciate you giving of yourselves to do the course and to provide it for first home buyers like us, because without it, like they're just, there's not that information around. So we, it's really good to have.
Very proud of you. And thank you for sharing your story with others, because you don't know what you don't know. And sometimes hearing it from other people who have been through the journey is just incredibly valuable. So thank you for sharing.
Our pleasure.
No worries.
In this episode, we've only touched on a tiny part of the huge amount of things you need to know to become an educated first home buyer. There is so much more for you to do. You can learn all of the steps in the right order and avoid all of the mistakes that others have made in our 10-step online course for first home buyers.
If you'd like to learn more about the right process and avoid making rookie errors, become an educated home buyer. Head over to the website, check out your first home buyer guide, the course that we have created for you. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you won't miss an episode. And if you've liked what you've heard today, please give us an iTunes review. It helps other people find us. And of course, I know it's a bit cringy, but we're going to ask for 5 stars. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. We hope you've found this really useful. And if you have, please share the love with others who you know are in the same boat. We'll be back next week with more priceless stuff.